This month of August is an exploration called A Hero's Journey, Healed People Heal People. And as a part of the service each week, I have been interviewing individuals and putting their story into a format that would help convey some of the incredible things that they have experienced in their life and the incredible gold or God within that they've been able to excavate and bring forth. Because I truly believe that life is really about one thing, and that is to coming to know who we are as an expression of all that is. And discovering what we're made of. Because if we are made in the image and likeness of God, all that is, then bringing forth what we're made of is about bringing forth God. You know, the alchemists used to believe that you could read where they were trying to turn base metal into gold. But it was really symbolism of trying to figure out how to turn the baseness of our physical being into the gold of a God being. And I believe that each and every one of us are here. It just has been said, we are the likeness and image of God. There are no exceptions. Jesus knew who he was, and his greatest message was to say, and you are too. You know, you are also the sons and daughters of God. Claim it, wake up to it. You have heir to the kingdom. And I believe that that's what this life is about, that life is always asking us, do we know who we are? And we're opening up to this. There's a story, I'm sure many of you have probably heard it, about a mother had a son who was sort of unruly, and she took him to her parish to see the local, the head priest, to talk to her son and hopefully be able to instill some reverence and just help him settle down. And so he was a little nervous when he went in, and his mom and sister were waiting somewhere else in the building, and the priest sat down with him and he said, son, I just have one question for you. Where is God? And the little boy's eyes got big, and he ran out and he grabbed his sister and he said, come on, we have to leave. And she said, what's going on? And he said, well, apparently God is missing, and they think I've done it, that I've done something with that. I think whether we realize it or not, life is always saying, a lot of times, God appears to be missing. Many would have looked at Charlottesville yesterday and said, where is God? You know, there's the book that Rabbi Kushner wrote, Why Do Bad Things Happen to Good People? You know, why do bad things happen to spiritual people? Why do bad things happen to innocent people, innocent children? That's a question that every single individual has pondered in their heart. And depending on where you come from and your experiences, you know, why do these bad things happen to good people, seemingly innocent people? There's many different ways you can respond. Some people just say, well, some people have bad luck, some people have good luck. It's coincidence. Some people call it fate. Some people say that it's God's will, that this happened and that happened. Some people would say it's karma, that it's something working itself out. Some people would say it's all about what we hold in consciousness. Some people would say it's about our soul's journey, our soul's choice, a soul evolution. And I would ask you, have you ever believed one and then that shattered and now you believe another? And how comfortable are you embracing some mystery around that? Because the truth of the matter is, none of us know for sure. We can know what we believe, we can hold on to a belief, and while that's neither good nor bad, so often what it does is it desensitizes us. It puts us in a place of judgment. It puts us in a place where we can look at something and say, well, they must have brought it on themselves. Or there must be a bigger plan. And when we do that, when we go to these beliefs, we bypass our heart. You know, the fact that this service has worked out the way that it did and people have cried together, I think our world needs to sit down and cry together. Because if we cry together, we open together, we see our humanness together. Well, that question, why do bad things happen to good people or innocent people, it's as old as have been people. If you think about some of the mystics and the icons of spiritual leaders, the Buddha, what was it that set him on his path? He saw suffering. He saw hurt. And it led him on a path that he began to get quiet until he discovered an inner territory, what Jesus called the kingdom within. He began to discover something within and what he called a higher self, an aspect of ourself that is so much more than just what may meet the eye. And the scriptures speak of the very same thing. And many of you may remember Paul, who started out as Saul. Saul was really trying to kill the followers of Jesus. He was totally against them. And then he was on the road to Damascus. He was blinded by the light. You may remember that story, that the light literally blinded him, and he was converted, so to speak. He began to see that his thinking was wrong. And he began to realize that there was a different way, and that way was love. And when that happened, his name was changed from Saul to Paul, because the name held a person's nature. And so when there was such a change of a person's personality, the name, like Sarai became Sarah, Abram became Abraham, Saul became Paul, because their nature changed so dramatically. But even later, after having all that experience, Paul talked about having a thorn in the flesh. The scriptures never said what it was, but you don't have to try to figure that out. You just know that it was something physically painful. And what the scripture says in 2 Corinthians, this is Paul saying, and this is the Message translation, I begged God to remove this 3 times. 3 times I prayed to God to remove this thorn in the flesh, and God spoke to me saying, my grace is enough. It is all you need. My strength comes into its own in your weakness. I think another way to say that would be is the strength of the great I am shows up in those places where we run out of our own resourcefulness. You know, anybody in a 12-step program, if you've come to the end and saying, I can't do this, you come to discover a higher power. And that higher power is accessed through you, through your beliefs, through your openness. There's another similar story that is found in the Gospel of John, where some of Jesus' followers, a couple of the disciples, were walking with Jesus, and they looked over and they saw a man who had been born blind at birth. And so the scripture says, walking down the street, Jesus saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked, Rabbi, who sinned? Who did something wrong? This man or his parents, causing him to be blind? You see, they were asking that same thing. Why do bad things happen to good people? Why would a child be born blind? Was it karma? Was he reaping something his parents did? They're asking the exact same thing. But the response is pretty amazing. Jesus said, you're asking the wrong question. You're looking for someone to blame. There is no such cause-effect here. Look instead for what God can do. Another translation says, but this has happened so that the work of God may be displayed in this life. You see, I don't believe, this is my belief, I don't believe things happen to us so much as it's about what happens in us and through us. That it's in the places in our life that when we're broken, we come to discover what we're made of. That life is always asking you, where is your God? Where is your source? And what are you made of? And hopefully we're bringing what we're made of to life. We're bringing the light, the love, the peace. Because that's the way healing takes place in this world. When we become an embodiment of peace wherever we are, peace is. When we become an embodiment and practice of forgiveness, wherever we are, there is no condemnation. When we become an embodiment of love, unconditional love, wherever we are, love is. And just as he sang about in that song, one day I believe we'll walk hand in hand in peace. It will be when each of us are walking as an embodiment of peace, when we have excavated the God, the gold, the peace of our soul, that we bring it forth. I want to invite 3 individuals up today to share a story this week that to me really will call you into that question. It's not an easy story to hear. And, you know, sometimes it's a little risky to do this with congregations, but I believe we're up for it. Because I believe we need to be willing to have the hard conversations so that the healing can take place in the light. It's my joy to welcome Megan, Wanda Marie, and Maceo. Would you give them a warm welcome?
Thank you. Thank you for being here. And as Reverend Darlene said, things happen for us, not necessarily to us. It happens for us so that we can be all that we can be as God. So as you're listening to this story, don't think of a victim, think of a hero, okay? So, and also hold me in consciousness for following a script because I'm not used to doing that. My name is Wanda Marie, and I share my story with you today so that you may know inner peace, joyful living is possible. No matter where you came from, no matter where you're going, no matter what you're going through right now, you can change and things can change for you.
Wanda was born in Oklahoma, but soon moved to California, where she spent most of her life. Her mother had 2 sons and was trying to get out of an abusive marriage when she found out she was pregnant again.
Mama was in her intoxicated state of truth one day when I asked her why she named me Wanda. While under the influence, she always told me exactly how she felt. She told me she had tried to get rid of me, that I was an unwanted pregnancy. I was the 3rd child that she was to have with the man who constantly beat her. She had secretly saved money to run away, leaving Tulsa and moving to California to find a job. Her plan was to run, leaving my brothers behind. She would send for them later when she had the money. But being pregnant, well, with the 3rd child, it changed everything, and she felt trapped. She jumped off chairs, drank castor oil, and tried everything she could to abort the pregnancy. She said she named me Wanda because it's a wonder I'm here.
When Wanda was 3 months old, her mother did escape that abusive relationship and ran from Oklahoma to California, taking Wanda with her. Unfortunately, she had to leave Wanda's 2 brothers behind with their father.
Wanda's mother was never able to get her sons back, but as they grew older, they were able to come and visit and spend time over the summer and for holidays.
My mother was a broken woman, but she adored me. She loved me to pieces. She found a place for us to live in the slums of South Central Los Angeles. She cleaned houses and worked hard, taking classes at night to become a nurse, which she eventually did.
Her mother also had various boyfriends, and she would spend the weekends getting drunk. Wanda wanted a place of peace and stability in her home.
I was dazzled by the kindness of a man whom the kids on the block adored as Uncle D. D stood for Daniel. He would come home from work wearing hard hat covered in paint and cement, handing out nickels and dimes and candies to all the kids in the neighborhood. We would flock to meet his truck.
At age 6, one day, Wanda took Uncle D and handed him to her mother in the apartment where she lived and introduced them. She said, "Mama, this is going to be my new daddy."
My mother was so embarrassed. She had seen this man around before, but had never really met him, so she kept apologizing for my gesture.
But her mother soon fell in love with the gentle giant who gradually moved in and went from being Uncle D to Daddy D.
I'd like to share something from the book. Mama worked as a nurse on the graveyard shift. Each night I begged her to stay home as I watched her get dressed and leave the house. Daddy D would fall asleep watching John Wayne on the television. I would go into my bedroom and play teacher. I would line up all my dolls on the bed and pretend they were my students. Daddy D would wake up and come into my room and put me to bed like a loving father. He would tuck me in, kiss me goodnight on the forehead, and leave the room. I would cross my fingers, hoping that he would not return. He would come back, awakening me in the wee hours of the morning for his sexual gratification. During the moments of molestation, I would leave my body and imagine myself flying with angels to escape. I would simply disappear.
Daddy D appeared to be a good father in every other way. He told her this was their secret, and he was very loving, telling her that he was teaching her how to grow up, and she could never tell anyone. She needed to be a good girl.
At 6 years old, he took my innocence and he took my voice away. He forbade me to speak my truth.
Wanda also received a weekly allowance for doing her house chores, and Daddy D would secretly give her extra money, large bills, and whisper, "This is for being a good girl."
For much of Wanda's life, she had an issue with cash money. She never liked handling money. It felt dirty. It took some time for her to make the connection, but once she did, it could be healed.
The day when I finally told Mama, she dealt with the situation the only way she knew how. She chose to live in denial. She had confronted him, and he had denied ever touching me. We all quietly swept it underneath the carpet and pretended it never happened. I continued to hold this secret, but now the three of us shared the burden. I found escape in my school books. I was a straight-A student, quite the overachiever. I was in desperate need of approval from all of my teachers. Mama found escape in her favorite place, at the bottom of a vodka bottle. Daddy D continued to beat her, thinking he could get her to stop drinking. He never touched me again.
As the years went by, Wanda's mother's drinking increased, and she became more and more dangerous, not only to herself, but to those around her. She decided a knife was no longer good enough, so her weapon of choice became a small but powerful handgun.
Wanda's mother was a respectable registered nurse during the day and a raging alcoholic on her days off. And Daddy D was a cement mason and a professional gambler. Fights that ended with someone hurt and bleeding were a weekly occurrence. The home was filled with vicious words, loud, angry yelling, and violence that seemed to invite death into their house.
As she reached junior high school, Wanda found refuge and protection in a boyfriend. In the 6th grade, she ended up with a boyfriend who was a gang leader and the head of the notorious gang, the Crips.
It seemed I always had someone to love and protect me. And this boyfriend was no different. At that time, everyone was involved in a gang, so the impact of who he was really didn't register to me.
Many of Wanda's friends were getting pregnant at 12 and 13 years old, but she would not allow this to happen. She refused to give herself away, and her boyfriend respected her for that and honored it.
And Wanda also found refuge in her angel friends.
I always had a sense of being connected to beings of light and the presence of love. When I was 2 and 3 years old, small enough to stand on the church pew, I remember being in church with my grandmother. As I was listening to the preacher I was saying and shaking my head, "That's not true. That's not true." I hated church because of what I was hearing was not true for me. I had an inner knowingness and a direct experience of Spirit and God being pure love.
During the times when Wanda was being violated by Daddy D, her awareness would leave her body.
It is as if my spirit and awareness would just go to another place. And in that place, it was like a classroom where we were being taught by beings of light. I had one angel friend. She was a white girl about my age with long blonde hair, and she seemed to glide across the floor. She would be with me when I was being violated, when I was afraid, even when I was walking to school through a dangerous neighborhood. I grew up in South Central LA, and there was no white people, but she was white, and she was with me for years. Later in life, I realized she was one of my spirit guides. A friend of mine who could see spirit actually drew a picture one day. I wouldn't quite believe it, but when I saw the picture, I burst into tears. I knew it was real for me. It was my angel friend who had taught me and loved me and looked after me for all of those early years.
In school, Wanda was a straight-A student. She was very active and involved in sports and modern dance. She had a real desire to be a good girl and to excel in her studies and to make a better life for herself.
When Wanda was in high school, a kind young Christian man from the Midwest moved next door. Over time, they became friends, and eventually he became her boyfriend.
When I was 17, I got pregnant and I was devastated. I wanted to give the baby up for adoption, but my boyfriend, he wouldn't hear of it. He was an older Christian man, believed in good values. My mother was just grateful that he was a good man and not a thug like the other boyfriends.
Wanda was a senior in high school, and she was sent to an all-girls school for pregnant teens. She graduated with honors and received a science scholarship, but could not accept it because she would soon be a new mom.
Wanda came home one day and found her parents fighting again. This time, her mother shot her father in the leg. He collapsed to the floor, and Wanda ran out of the house and called 911.
This was too much. Wanda was not only afraid for herself, but soon she would have a newborn baby. She decided to accept her boyfriend's plea and moved in next door with him. Soon after, the baby was born. They were married, and the baby was 3 months old.
Well, Daddy D left Mama. After he was shot, he never came back. A few years later, Mama was dating another man, and she actually shot and killed him. She was in a drunken rage. She ended up serving time in prison and was finally released. She didn't drink as much after that, but she could never forgive herself. She could never find inner peace and happiness. And on the night of her death, there was an empty vodka bottle at her side.
And Daddy D? Wanda never saw him again until many years later when she received a call because she was listed as his only living relative. He was in the hospital dying of cancer, and she had to make the decision whether to pull the plug of life support. Literally, his life was now in her hands.
It was the perfect opportunity for me to get even as he lay there helpless and give him a piece of my mind. But thankfully, as a result of reading lots of self-help books and going to lots of workshops and visiting with lots of spiritual teachers, I was in a different place. There was no hatred in my heart. Instead, there was compassion for a broken man. I was able to hold his hand and care for him for a few days. It gave him the opportunity to look into my eyes, and though he could barely speak, his eyes spoke much louder than words. His deep regret was evident. In the end, love was the only thing left.
Wanda had clearly done a lot of work. She and her husband had reared a son, and they had a second son, and worked to create a home and a family that was grounded in love and respect and calm.
Wanda worked with the Job Corps and then became a paralegal. One day, she had a headache at work, and a coworker, who was a woman from China, put her hands on Wanda's head for a few moments, and suddenly the headache was gone.
I thought she was God. And I wanted to know how she could make a headache go away like that, so quick.
Well, since Wanda was a teenager, she had been reading sacred texts like the Bible, Quran, the Book of the Mormon, and others, and always having a sense of being connected to angels and a spiritual presence. She had an interest in world religions and other spiritual matters.
So when the coworker introduced Wanda to metaphysics and energy work, it was a natural next step.
She started taking classes, and it was more like remembering than learning. When it came to energy work and working as a channel, she could not understand why everybody just couldn't do this. She was a natural.
Things at home began to shift. I discovered my husband was not being very faithful. The trust was gone. After 17 years of marriage, I filed for divorce and moved out. But we continued to have a close relationship with our children and raised them in an amicable way.
Wanda worked full-time, but when she started taking classes and graduated from a metaphysics program, she discovered science of mind and also became certified in neuro-linguistic programming and hypnotherapy. She began working with clients, providing spiritual counseling and working as a successful spiritual channel.
Wanda was being sought after as a popular and successful channel, spiritual channel. However, she gradually became concerned about how people were relying on her as a channel for their help and advice. She wanted to help people discover the same truth and principles that she was using so that they could discover their own inner wisdom and spiritual power.
Wanda discovered the Agape Spiritual Center and the Reverend Michael Beckwith in Los Angeles. She studied and became a spiritual practitioner and also received certification as a master executive coach through the Behavioral Coaching Institute.
You know, she had a dream that she'd marry a bow-legged drummer. When she met Ron LaPont, it was obvious that he was bow-legged. But she almost fell onto the floor the day that she discovered he had traveled as a professional musician, professional drummer for years. She made him go to the club and actually play the drums so he could prove it.
He really was and is an amazing drummer. I fell in love. We eventually got married. I married that bow-legged drummer. Only Spirit could see that coming.
In 1994, she left a successful corporate career to pursue her full-time passion of helping people create positive and lasting change in their own lives.
Wanda had discovered the power of living a spirit-based life, practicing and teaching awareness, acceptance, forgiveness, gratitude, faith, surrender, prayer, meditation, giving, and serving. This was truly her life.
I quickly built a successful business and private practice. One day, I met a woman who wanted me to work with her on a regular basis. This woman was seeking self-empowerment. She told me, "I'm a powerful woman, but I'm not empowered." She said, "I want to speak my truth, but I'm afraid I'll be killed." After the woman left my house, my husband Ron said, "Wow, is Yolanda King your client?" I always maintained client confidentiality, so I asked, "I didn't mention her name. How do you know her name?" He looked at me and said again, "Yolanda King? Like daughter of Coretta Scott King and Dr. Martin Luther King?" And I'm like, oh my God. I thought, no wonder she's afraid of speaking her truth and getting killed.
Wanda had not recognized Yolanda, and Yolanda had not made it a point to reveal who she was.
She did become a client, and I worked with Yolanda King for about a year as her life coach. Then one day, intuitively, I got that I was supposed to run her company. A short time after, Yolanda's business manager was killed in a plane crash.
Wanda and Yolanda King did begin to work together. Wanda became the executive director of her company, Higher Ground Incorporated. They traveled the world together. The business grew by leaps and bounds, and they co-authored the book, Embracing Your Power in 30 Days. One of the final things Yolanda King did was write the foreword to Wanda Marie's book, titled Living Inner Peace, before she suddenly passed away in 2007 from heart disease.
Working with the eldest daughter of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., seeing her step into her spiritual power so she could live her legacy was a great joy and honor for me. She's one of the many that I've had the blessing to bear witness to. As people can truly come to know that they are one with God, we are all one with God. It can release us from anything and set us free to be all that we were created to bring forth into this world.
In 2011, Wanda Marie and Ron moved to Asheville after attending a CSL annual conference here and having a strong sense that this was where they were being guided to live.
Today, Wanda has 4 grandchildren, and she continues to share her passion and gifts of spirit by working with people.
I know what it's like to live in shame and fear and violence. I know what it feels like to have your voice taken away. I know what it feels like to be surrounded by hurt and gloom. And I know that all of these things are temporary. My mom used to say, "This too shall pass." So there is a power within all of us that we have to acknowledge. And I'm supposed to read something else from the book here. Hold on. My first husband and I were married for 17 years. Beyond the unfortunate situation concerning my mother that I brought into the marriage, we had a beautiful life together until it was time to go our separate ways. At the time of writing this book, I've been with my second husband for 21 years as of last week. And we are enjoying a beautiful life together. As a student of life and teacher of metaphysics, I'm always growing and changing, so I honor the men that have hung in there with me, including my 2 wonderful sons and my beautiful grandchildren. Life is truly, truly good. I'm supposed to end a different way, but I'm just going to say that the reason that I wrote this book and the reason I'm really here to share my story is because I want you guys to walk away with the tools for living inner peace. I believe that the violence that's happening in our world today wouldn't be happening if everyone had inner peace. So if you can just find it in your heart to say, what do I need to do to find peace with this? I don't care if it's something as simple as losing your car keys. Can you find peace with that as well as finding peace with the death of whoever? I committed my life to living inner peace, and 10 days later, my mom passed away. How do you have inner peace when you're grieving? I wrote 12 steps to inner peace. It's in this book. You don't have to buy the book to get it. Reverend Christie here printed out forms for you. They're on the table out there. It's 12 steps to gain inner peace. Please look at them and share them. Thank you for hearing my story.
As you're being seated, take a moment and look at the person to your right. Now take a moment and look at the person at your other right. For those of you that are a little challenged. Just turn a little bit and just spot someone. Last week we heard stories of two different people, Vern and David, and this week, Wanda Marie. See, you never know the one that's sitting beside you, their story. We never know the story of the one that does the horrific crime. That's why we were told to judge not. We all come with our story. We also come with this higher purpose. We come as an expression of the divine. The Buddhists call it the Atman. The mystical Christians call it the Christ. The divine spark. It's this perfect presence of human potential that expresses itself through spirit. That's the great gift Jesus brought. He demonstrated it fully and said, "Follow me and do the same thing." We share these stories so that we may excavate the God, the gold within, that we may learn these steps, and that we may stand in peace as part of one family. Would you join me in this song? We're part of one family, the family of God, breathing one spirit, living one life. We're in this together, finding our way. Let love be our guiding light, and on course we'll stay. You sound beautiful. Lift your voice. We're part of one family, the family of God, breathing one spirit, living one life. We're in this together, and we're finding our way. Let love be our guiding light, and on course we'll stay. So as we close our eyes and turn our awareness within, we recognize there is one power, one presence, one life that animates all creation. And that each and every day we are asking to bring it to life. That as we die daily, the ego self, the small self, the self that thinks that it, in and of its limited ways of thinking or believing, knows how to figure it out or knows how to do it, we allow that self to give way to the great I am, which is also a dimension of our self. It is that self that is born of spirit. It is that self that is pure perfection. It is that self that sees itself in all creation and would harm none. It is pure love. It is pure light. It is wholeness. We call forth that from within our own being. May I bring forth all that I am as an expression of all that is. And that whole Holy Spirit of life, when I don't know how to do it, there is something in me that does. And so I pay attention to the signs along the way. I do my forgiveness work. I commit my time in prayer and meditation. I turn it over. I surrender. And in that, I am opened. I am the opening. I am the way, the light, and the truth. May we join together in this truth, bringing forth who we are and looking upon every other face, and no matter how they show up, We don't judge the appearance. We see the soul, and we love the soul. And then we can come from a place of love to do the work, to heal, to correct, to make amends, to hold people accountable without demonizing them, to do it from a place of love. And it's here that peace is born, that a new reality, the kingdom of heaven, begins to show up as the beloved community in and through and as us. We recognize ourselves as that perfect spirit. The perfect spirit dwells within me, and I let it live me. And I join with you, my brother and my sister, as part of one family. 'Cause we're part of one family, the family of God, breathing one spirit, living one life. We're in this together, finding our way. Let love be our guiding light, and on course we'll stay. We're part of one family, the family of God, breathing one spirit, living one life. We're in this together, finding our way. Let love be our guiding light, and on course we'll stay. Let love be my guiding light. Let love be my guiding light, and on course I'll stay. We give thanks for this and in this, and so it is. Amen. We are truly part of one family.